Well, but then it's
Right, right.
Are these in here too?
No, this is just extras.
I never heard of
Take
someone.
our copies of it.
Okay.
That was awesome.
I don't know if I should put my glasses on or not, because I made them for distance, but I can't see with them on. I'll have to keep doing this.
There you go, good luck.
So I'm terrible with names, I'm Laura Chance.
They always come through the end.
Thank you.
And I'm terrible with names.
Thank you for breaking the ice.
Yeah,
I don't forget faces. If I have names, just, I lose them very quickly.
We have Sue, we have, and we've got Norma. So,
I'm very good.
Yeah, just a good name.
If I have, maybe she got my face.
So, yeah, that's a fun thing. I don't know that person.
I was out with a friend, just watching football game yesterday afternoon, and there was a woman sitting next to me, and I know you, but couldn't get.
yeah, finally figured it out.
No, never did.
That's work.
I was a little bit about the game.
Oh, yeah. I had to work, so I didn't.
I started doing German.
That might be a good thing.
Within the company, so.
You like it?
I got to see some of the second one,
It's frustrating.
but they won, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're gonna get started. So thank you everybody for coming this evening. I'm Anita Shipers, I'm your town administrator, and appreciate that you're here tonight with this lousy weather. We are actually recording this meeting tonight, so it's not a live broadcast, but we will be airing it on our cable stations, throughout the next few weeks, so that people who weren't able to attend tonight, they can still try to get some of this information. It's really important that we get a lot of public feedback on this process, and it's your town, it's your master plan. With your help, we can try to guide our different boards and committees in terms of hitting the priorities that we have as a community over the next few years. So I appreciate you coming tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Dunn, who is the member of the committee, and she'll take it from here.
So I am going to read what's on the screen, even though you have it in front of you, for the people who are not here, so they may not be able to read it as well on the TV. So I'll read the list of townwide planning committee members. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if you are here, please raise your hand. Siobhan Bonson, Selectman Designee. Pat Bryant, Financial Committee. Cheryl Carlson, Planning Board. Norma Chanis. Raymond DeSanti. Joanne Dunn, that's me. Tony Sanders. Sue Miola. James Morrissey, School Designee. Tony Sanders. Richard Cimarano. And Anita Shipers, Town Administrator. So, master plan update process. The town's master plan was last updated in 2005. The bylaw requires a town comprehensive plan to be updated every 5 years. We haven't been doing it every 5 years. The townwide planning committee shall encourage, assist, and review long and short-term planning efforts by boards, committees, and officials of the town, and incorporate these plans into a comprehensive townwide plan. The townwide plan shall be presented to the town meeting for approval by the voters. The comprehensive townwide plan shall be reviewed and updated at least every 5 years. The townwide planning committee agreed to develop a more concise document with chapters which include only crisply defined content to update the master plan content. The old one is this thick, and it's just difficult for people to get through. It's a little dense, and it's also hard for the committees and boards to pick out the important parts in their own chapters. So we thought we would go with this more streamlined, leaner format, which limits the chapter content to overview of the information included, identifying key finding of current period, identifying key challenges that need to be addressed, and identifying goals to be worked on over the next 5 years. And anything that's necessary, that's additional information, is also placed in an appendix. The specific chapters in the document are land use and zoning, population and housing, economic development, transportation network, open space and recreation, cultural and historic resources, municipal facilities, finance, and schools. There's also an implementation plan. So this public forum will focus on the 4 following draft chapters: population and housing, schools, transportation network, and economic development. So population and housing. I don't know if somebody's here to...
No, I don't think we have a member here tonight, so I'll fill in.
Okay.
So the Population and Housing chapter has been put together through the work of the Affordable Housing Trust, and they did work with a consultant to pull together the specifics of this chapter. In the overview for this Population and Housing chapter, they give us a number of statistics that help kind of frame the issue of our housing and where our population changes might be over the next few years. So since 2000, the population has increased 4.7% to 7,834 people. The number of children under the age of 5 has actually decreased by about 22%, and the number of children between 5 and 14 has dropped almost 40%. So it was pretty interesting to see. Our senior population, though, has grown by 16% and is expected to double from 1,346 individuals to 2,708 individuals. That's an increase of 1,362 people. People between the age of 55 and 64 grew by 55.8%, and those individuals will be reaching full retirement age within the next 10 years. So you can see the demographics definitely are changing in our community. Our aging population is definitely growing. In terms of housing, our single-family home is still our primary housing unit. We do have a small number of rental units in our community. In terms of the costs of housing, the rule of thumb is that a household should not pay more than 30% of its income toward housing costs. And if you do pay more than 30%, you're declared to be housing cost burden, meaning that it's a financial deficit to be spending that much money, that much of your income on housing. Half of the renter households that we have in town right now are considered housing cost burden because they're paying at what is the average rate. It's not even a high rate. Those that are currently paying the median rent are considered housing cost burden because they're paying more than 30% of their household income. 31% of the households have incomes below the area median income, and that's a formula set by the state. And they would be eligible for housing assistance. So 31% of our households in town are eligible for housing assistance. The elderly households are particularly affected by housing cost. 54% of the elderly households are housing cost burden and would be eligible for housing assistance. Some key findings within this chapter are that we have 8.1% of our housing stock qualifies for subsidized housing inventory. This is a qualification by the state. You've probably heard of the 40B law, which means that we have to have at least 10% of our housing stock as affordable housing. And to be affordable housing, it means that it has to be achievable for people who are at or below that 80% median income level. And it has to be subsidized in such a way that it means that it's protected to continue on as affordable housing. So we currently have 8.1% of our housing is in the SHI. We need to have 10%. The rapid growth that we're projecting on our senior population requires that we start to develop a diverse housing stock. and more subsidized senior housing is going to be needed. For the key challenges, we have only 7.6% of our land available to be developed. So we would have to look to do some adaptive reuse of existing housing stock, and it may require some zoning changes to provide some more flexibility in developing that diverse housing stock. More rental units have been declared to be needed. Route 12's commercial area may need to be developed into, a village-style, pedestrian-friendly zone. And growth in the senior population will increase demand on municipal services. So for the housing plan that this group has put together, they have 6 different goals that they're looking to meet. And I won't go into all the detail on these tonight. You have, for those of you who are here in the room, your handout shows what they are in the table that's included. The content of this PowerPoint presentation will also be placed on the website. So if anyone isn't here tonight and are not able to read this on the screen, it will be available to be viewed on our town website. So for the goals of the Housing and Population chapter, it includes continue planning for development of some senior housing at Orchard Knoll. And this would be something that the Housing Authority and the Affordable Housing Trust would take on. The second goal is to conduct community outreach to inform the public of the town's housing needs and gain support for local initiatives, such as the senior housing at Orchard Knoll. The next goal is to analyze underdeveloped privately owned land, that's 7.6% of the town property, to assess its suitability for perhaps higher density housing. And this would be done by the Affordable Housing Trust. The next goal is to develop a comprehensive permit policy that includes guidelines for developers to design projects that protect our environment and preserve neighborhood quality of life. And this would be taken on by the Affordable Housing Trust and the Board of Appeals. Next goal is to develop new affordable housing for seniors and families and to monitor existing units to make sure that they're in compliance with the restrictions on those affordable housing units. And that would be taken on by the Affordable Housing Trust. Next would be to promote mixed-use development in the Route 12 corridor, to develop some innovative zoning and prepare a design manual to implement desired development patterns. And this would be something that would be looked at by the Planning Board. And lastly, to apply for housing rehabilitation funds, to take some of that older housing stock and look to see if we can get some financial assistance to do the rehabilitation of those units. And that would be something that would be looked at by the Town Administrator's Office. So that's it for the housing and population, and next we're going to go on to the school section. And tonight we have Jim Padone, who's chairman of the school committee, to walk us through it.
Thank you. For this first slide, I will just read it verbatim for those viewing. West Boylston Public Schools operates under the following theory of action. If we provide an aligned curriculum tightly linked to the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks and infuse that curriculum with highly quality personalized instruction aimed at improving student motivation and engaged in learning, including the including the use of 21st century technology, then the West Boylston Public Schools will produce graduates who are ready to achieve in any college or career they choose. Throughout 2017, Superintendent Chapa and a committee, including the district leadership team and community stakeholders, developed our strategic plan for the next 5 years. That is something I will go over at high level later on. Here are some key findings. The West Boylston Public Schools has developed 5 strategic objectives. Align curriculum to Massachusetts frameworks, promote personalized and responsive instructional approaches, recruit, retain, and develop high-quality staff, develop and enact community plan focusing on home-school partnerships, and determine options for improvement, repair, or replacement of school facilities. And a couple key challenges, changing nature of state standardized assessments. I'll go into a little bit of detail on this one. I'm sure many people are familiar with MCAS that have been around for close to 20 years now. In the past few years, they've changed and became MCAS 2.0, which is now, there was a transition, so now we have a different testing curriculum or fundamentals behind it, different scoring, so we don't really quite understand the tests. It's all online based now instead of paper. So there was definitely some challenges as far as infrastructure and being able to understand and prepare the students for these tests, so that's something that's ongoing. And then in addition to the significant number of residents, housing units in Oakdale, creating difficulty in planning for where to place educational resources and balancing school choice slots. As most people are aware, the complex going up on North Main Street will potentially bring in a significant number of students, and that right now is unknown as far as what that quantity will be. So I'll give a high level of these strategic goals. The first one, so this is a 5-year strategic plan, and every year is just reviewed and set for, a 5-year forward-thinking type of model. Number one would be to pilot, evaluate, and adopt blended outline and classroom-based learning platforms, including summit learning and multiple grade levels or subject areas. We have an ongoing curriculum revision process where every year we look at a new curriculum, ELA, health and physical education, foreign languages, mathematics, science and technology, social studies. In addition, embedded options for development of a 21st century skills into every newly revised curriculum. The second goal will be conduct a comprehensive review, personalized approach to learning, meeting social and emotional needs of students. Develop and implement a system-wide approach to personalized learning. Provide staff a training and workshops on personalization of learning environments and meeting social, emotional needs of students. Implement new programming and personalized learning, including circular and extracurricular offerings, learnings, including curricular and extra, looks like a redundancy there. Third goal would be to publish a comprehensive district mentoring and induction program guide. Train teachers, leaders to offer a 3-year teacher induction program course that is held in August. EPIC partnership grant activities with Assumption College. Provide training and specialized literacy instruction, including following Wilson Language System Foundation, Just Words. Train a Wilson reading system and expand opportunities for district-wide leadership. This goal is essentially about providing professional development for teaching staff and making them, aware of different programs that we're using for literacy. The fourth goal is to develop and offer workshops focused on helping parents partner in enhancing academic outcomes and facilitating school engagement. Workshops in school include School Brains, Summit Learning, Naviance, Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Classroom. Develop an online video series through which parents can access video workshops. These are just new tools that are being used in the district that help collaborate with parents and keep them a little bit more involved and in tune to what's going on a day-to-day basis. And the last one is to coordinate with key stakeholders, including town administrators, FISP, capital planning board, determine the needs for repair or replacement of school facilities within the next decade. Maintain a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Prepares long-range enrollment forecasts. Conduct a survey of existing buildings and review district education programs, calculating school capacities in relationship to current and anticipated educational programs. And now we're on to transportation.
So the transportation chapter was created by the Transportation Committee. And the overview for this chapter is that the Transportation Committee basically is responsible for looking at all forms of transportation within the town, whether it's vehicular traffic, bicycle, pedestrian traffic, and with safety of the residents and the transient population being primary focus of the whole effort. They've been looking at the traffic movements through town and some of the challenges and difficulties that traffic in our community encounters. And they've been working with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission to apply for grants under the Complete Streets program. And they've also been looking at developing plans to include the sidewalks and streets under the state's Mass Works program. Once the funds become available, the committee will then work to prioritize which projects need to be moved ahead over any others. In the key findings section of their chapter, they looked at sidewalks, and they found that despite some of the recent sidewalk projects that we've been able to do, many sidewalks still are deteriorating and need repair. They have concern about the safety of pedestrian crossings across Route 12. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. And they have found that Route 12 has sections of sidewalks that just are not connected. They also find that some of the openings into the parking for some of the commercial locations on Route 12, with the street openings being so wide, can make for dangerous pedestrian crossings. When it comes to the local roads are not eligible for federal funding, which is a large pocket of money for all communities in the state. But local roads are eligible for use of the annual state Chapter 90 money, of which we get about $290,000 a year. For our local roads, the narrow roads reduce options for some of that Complete Streets program that we talked about earlier, including bike lanes. The narrow roads just are not conducive to trying to install bike lanes. For the truck traffic that's trying to go through our community, they found that there's difficulty traversing some of the sharp corners that we have here in town, and we have a number of discontinued streets which make it difficult for trucks to get to the local highways. There was a 2017 pavement management plan that was done which evaluated the condition of the pavement on all of our town roads. And the findings from that pavement management plan show that the streets that are most in need of repair right now include Cary Ave, Church Street, Crescent Street in front of the elementary school, Bowen Street, Bowles Street, Henry Street, Lost Oak Road, Lower Newton Street, Maple Street from Worcester Street South, Osgood Street, Parker Street, Phelps Street, Pierce Street, Prospect Street, and Tobin Lane. Now, this is based on the condition of each of those roadways. There's actual score that's assigned to each of the roads after the pavement condition's been evaluated. So while we have a number of these streets that appear to be in poor condition, as you can imagine, moving forward and trying to decide annually how that Chapter 90 money gets used, it's a balancing game between which streets are more used, which would benefit more from having any kind of pavement improvements be done, versus the actual score for that particular road. So the committee has a lot of work ahead of them. The challenges that they're facing are that the Chapter 90 funds are limited, so it's always going to be that constant balancing act. State and federal funds are also limited, and we're in competition with every other city and town in the state for those dollars. Some of the sidewalks that we talked about on Route 12 are actually on state property, so we would need to develop a strong working relationship with Mass DOT in order to work up any of those projects. The Route 12 and Route 140 intersection needs to be reconfigured. It has one of the highest accident counts that we have in town, and that's been identified as being something that needs to be addressed. Any new sidewalks would require design, and in some areas, depending on the topography, may require the installation of retaining walls. Bike lanes under that Complete Street program are difficult to incorporate in many of the areas, and we need to redirect truck traffic as much as possible. So the goals that this committee has at this point are to prioritize repair of the local roads to use that annual Chapter 90 money, to pursue a solution to that Route 12, Route 140 intersection, and to implement the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan that was approved by the Board of Selectmen. Under their action plan, they have prioritizing which streets need repair, what type of repair is necessary, and taking into account the actual amount of traffic on the street. The second goal would be to look at this Route 12, Route 140 intersection and try to figure out a way to establish a realignment that would facilitate traffic movement and improve safety. The third goal would be to continue to submit applications to the state for complete street funding that would help with some of those sidewalk-related projects. And the fourth would be to continue to look at installing additional flashing stop signs on four-way intersections and evaluating the success of those measures and look to see if we need to make improvements on other intersections as well. And that's it for the transportation chapter. Chris, are you going to be speaking to economic development?
No, I didn't have
Okay, all right. And the fourth chapter that we have tonight is for economic development. And the overview for this draft chapter is that careful economic development has lasting positive effects for the town. It creates a stronger and more diverse tax base. It decreases tax impacts on residential property. It provides employment opportunities, and it provides needed goods and services for residents within our own community. Some of their key findings are that we have a strong commercial base right along Route 12. We also have a strong industrial base on Hartwell Street. West Boylston is part of a regional, state-recognized economic development target area, which has benefits in that it allows us to create some incentives for businesses that may want to come in or expand within our community. West Boylston has the ability to attract businesses due to the fact that we have a low single tax rate and affordable, reasonably priced utilities, water, sewer, and electric. And the TIF program, Tax Incentive Financing, is attracting new businesses to the area. We have one business, Curtis Manufacturing, that came in last year. We have another business that's beginning to have conversations now, looking to come into our community as well. Some of the challenges that we face in economic development are a lack of sidewalks to make the ease of access to the businesses better for pedestrians, a lack of parking, and competition from Worcester and other towns for attracting businesses. The goals for the Economic Development Committee at this point are to try to preserve the small town character and our natural resources that we all enjoy. The second goal is to look to establish annual funding sources beyond taxes. The third would be to look to establish cost-saving measures within municipal operations. And we're looking for some suggestions perhaps tonight or over the next few weeks to try to help us flesh out these goals and action items more. So those are the four draft chapters that we have at this point. As you can see, each one of them is in a slightly different stage of development, some better than others. Those committees will continue to flesh out those chapters, and part of the reason for meeting tonight is to seek feedback from you, those of you present tonight, those of you who may be watching on the television. We need to get some feedback from you as to whether or not we're accurate in the list of findings and challenges for each of these areas. You know, are there other things that the committee isn't thinking about? Are there other things that we should be, taking into consideration? And the goals that have been identified, are they the right goals? Should they be prioritized in a different way? This is the type of feedback we want. So in terms of the next steps, any suggestions that we receive tonight or over the next few weeks from the public reviewing on TV will be passed on to the appropriate committee, and they'll be considering those and looking to try to continue to flesh out and improve their draft chapters. And then we have a spring forum that's being planned to review the next 4 or 5 chapters in that list of the 11 chapters that we need to address. We have not set a date yet for that spring forum. So those are the next steps in this process. And so now we're ready to answer any questions that you may have on any of those chapters or about the process in general. Yes.
You said the senior center is going to, the amount of people is going to double. What time span is that? Is that?
I believe that was over the next 15 years they were looking at.
I have a,
One question back here.
sorry.
So, looking at the population figures, the school population is declining, and has been declining significantly. Yet the school plan doesn't address that. So where are those, how are we going to fill those gaps, those spaces in the existing school system? School choice?
So currently, we do that with school choice. However, this past year, we kind of not really taken less school choice. We were a little bit more cautious of who we were going to accept or the numbers because of the uncertainty with the Oakdale project. So we want to make sure that, you know, once we bring in someone school choice, they're ours until they decide to leave. So we don't want to overload the schools if all of a sudden we're going to have an influx from the Oakdale project. So we're kind of taking that in stride right now until we have more.
That's kind of really short term. I mean, I know the long-term forecast for high school graduation in Massachusetts is a decline, a significant decline. And so I would think you'd be looking at a significant decline in school population, but you're not addressing that in the plan.
Okay, so, you know, bring that back, but I guess, you know, follow-up response would be, you know, we do have the ability, there's a lot of kids that want to come in. So if it did come into a problem, we do have the ability to take in more school choice, but at this time.
Yeah, my understanding is that in grammar school, there are lots of kids on the waiting list, but it's harder to fill school choice spaces in high school.
That's not completely accurate. We do have a waiting list, depending on certain grades.
It seems to me that that should be in the plan.
Okay.
I mean, the data, population data is saying there's a problem. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to address it?
All right, I'll bring that feedback back. Thank you.
And one comment, I know this because I met with the superintendent last week, but one of the things that this 5th goal, one of the action items that will be addressed over the next 5 years is to do a new population projection, student population projection, to help understand you know, what the need is for the existing buildings and how that might play out in terms of the programmatic you know, requirements for the student population.
I have a question about new business coming to town. Is there a committee that could be set up so the process of coming to town and getting permits and getting them implemented and so they can go forward? Is there a speed process to that, more or less to take more government regulation out of the system so it doesn't take months or years for that company to come to town? Because what happens is they get defeated, they lose their enthusiasm, and they go somewhere else because of the regulations that come back next week, come back next month, and it turns into months or years. So is there some type of committee that can be set up to take that obstacle out of the way so they can get right through and get right into town? I'm not saying right away, but
Yeah.
a speedier process.
Yeah. No, so there are some communities that specifically have modified their permitting process so that they can guarantee that a business coming in will get all the necessary permits within a short window of time.
Right.
While we haven't taken that step, we have done a couple things that help, I think, improve the process for businesses coming in. The first thing is that any business coming in can request what we call a roundtable. And what that is, it's a meeting where we bring in representatives from each of the different permitting boards, from the building department, police, fire, DPW, anybody who might be involved in that review and permitting of their project. And we all sit down at a table, we review what the plan is, the proposed plan, and provide insight to the developer, to the business owner, right up front before they really start their process in detail. So it helps them understand what's expected, what we need from them in order to be able to make decisions. And it's really been proven to really help businesses shorten the complication and increase the time, decrease the amount of time it takes to get permitting done. The other thing is we do have the Economic Development Committee, and they're there as a resource to help any business that may be coming in. So if there's any, if there is some, perceived roadblock or something, that Economic Development Committee can step in and try to assist that business.
Thank you.
Transportation. It's good to see that in here they discuss bike traffic. Because we're on the bike loop that goes around the reservoir, we have a lot of bike traffic. Unfortunately, that's mostly on state highway, 140 and 12, and the state's not flexible usually in addressing or listening, I guess, to our local concerns. So for example, we just had the rebuild here at the border between Boylston and West Boylston, and absolutely nothing was done about that curve, which is the most, if you're a biker, that's the most horrendous curve in the entire circuit around the reservoir. And it's just as bad as it was. Nothing happened there.
No, you're absolutely right on that.
And yeah, and we could use a little more room, I think, for biking here along 140. So I don't know what the answer is there, but we certainly responsiveness from the state in dealing with the traffic is a concern. Maybe that needs to be shown in the plan a little more clearly.
Yeah. And just using your example of the S-curve on 140 near the Boylston Town Line, when we were made aware that Mass DOT was going to be doing that project on behalf of DCR, members of the planning board, members of the board of selectmen went and attended the hearings and specifically asked Mass DOT, can you hold off on doing this work until we can put a design in place that would allow for widening of the road to improve not only the vehicular safety, but bike safety, because it is definitely a well-used corridor for our bicyclists. And what we were told was that that was a drainage project only. And despite the fact that the state commits to designing into each project that they fund all the components of complete streets, which includes bike lanes, in this instance, they were not obligated to do that because it was not a road rehabilitation project, it was a drainage project. So it limited what they were willing to do at the time. They did tell us, though, at that time, that if the town decides to bring forward a road rehab project for that section or any other section of 140, that Mass DOT would definitely be behind us and help us with the design of that, help us getting that project onto the state improvement plan, state's traffic improvement plan. We talked about competition of funds. That's the list we have to get on to get that state and federal funding to be developed. So you're right, it's something that we need to work with the state on. If it's a normal road rehabilitation project, state funded, we have to make sure that it checks off all the boxes of complete streets, which includes bike lanes, etc.
An additional comment, Franklin Street, the new sidewalk coming up to Route 12, you're supposed to have a crossing, right? And that's another problem where you need state approval to put the crossing in. It does have a crossing.
It does have a crossing.
It finally does have a crossing.
Yep.
It took a
But
very long time.
But what we're looking at, because of that existing concern about safety of pedestrian crossings along Route 12, we're looking at trying to put in some sort of a flashing sign that will hopefully make traffic more aware of the fact that there's pedestrian crossing there. Any other questions? Okay. If you have questions after tonight, please still feel free to send them along. You can send them to me or any member of the committee. I'm probably the easiest one to access because I have right on the town administrator webpage, there's a way to just email me quickly. Any questions, comments, feedback. So please take advantage of that. And thank you so much for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.